After completing my 10th class exams in 1979, my father suggested that I go and help my father's uncle and learn astrology. Mathematics being my favorite subject, I learned the calculations. My grandfather taught me how to calculate the inclinations of each planet and how to calculate the Lagna and the meridian center MC. And he gave me some birth charts to draw. Thus, I learned how to draw the birth charts first and showed interest in predictions. So my grandfather told me some predictions, some of the tips that he usually uses for predictions. And after learning those tips, I documented some of them. I verified with my father. While my father and my grandfather have laid the foundation for me to get interested in astrology, for almost a decade or 2 decades, I didn't show any interest. Most of the people, particularly in United States, are aware that the first female Attorney General, Janet Reno, died on 7th November 2016. She was around 78 years old. So we don't know exactly. I searched the Astro Data Bank and they don't have the exact time of birth. So what I did was I picked the date of birth and the place of birth, and then on that day I checked the position of moon, natal moon, in which Rashi is it at 00 hours and again at 23 hours 59 minutes. That means the whole 24 hours. If the natal moon has not moved, or if the natal moon is in the same Rashi for the whole 24 hours, then I consider that birth chart and use Chandra Lagna for analysis. For this lady, Janet Reno, on her on her birthday, natal moon was in the same house for the whole 24 hours. So I used her birth chart without, since I don't know the time of her birth, I ignored the ascendant and considered moon as a lagna or the ascendant, and then analyzed her birth chart for the reasons for her death. And to make sure that the my analysis is correct, I went to the Bhirgu Sarla Chakra Paddhati and looked at who is the cycle ruler and tried to analyze based on BCP rules. I hope you will enjoy this presentation. Please note, this presentation is exclusively for educational purposes only. I do have the highest respect for her being the first women Attorney General for to United States. So please note that do not consider this for any other purposes. This is for educational purposes, and my primary intention is to teach people or make people understand how you can analyze the chart using Chandra Lagna and under what conditions should you consider the Chandra Lagna chart. Hope you'll enjoy it. Thank you. Let's now begin with the Chandra Lagna. As I said earlier, the first and the foremost thing that I usually look, if I don't know the time of birth, what I do is that I take the natal moon position on that day at 0 hours 1 minute. That means 1 minute after midnight, and then I take the natal moon position 1 minute before the midnight, that is 23 hours 59 minutes. So as you see in the screen, on the screen, on 21st July 1938, when Janet Reno was born in Miami, Florida, the natal moon was in Aries, Mesha Rasi. So right from midnight all the way till 23 hours 59 minutes, that means for the whole 24 hours natal moon is in the same Rashi. So when you find that the natal moon is stationary, in the I mean saying that natal moon is in the same Rashi for the whole 24 hours, then what I do is that I take the Chandra Lagna, and then I ignore the ascendant. As I said earlier, I ignore the ascendant, take the Chandra Lagna, and then use the Lagna as the main ascendant and analyze her birth chart, the native's birth chart. Along with that, I use the Bihurugu Chakra Paddhati. So since I know the event date when it happened, I take the event's date and then look in Bihurugu Chakra Paddhati and figure it out, which planet is the cycle ruler and which house did that cycle ruler activated from the cycle ruler's natal position. So let's go and see for this lady Janet Reno, why the inauspicious event. She died on 7th November 2016. So let's go and analyze her birth chart using Chandra Lagna and BCP rules. Now let's go and first look at her birth chart with the assumption that we do not know the time of birth. We just know the place of birth and the date of birth. Whenever you find a native with just the date of birth and the time and place of birth and do not know the time of birth, as I said earlier, first you have to look at the natal moon on that day. Is the natal moon in the same Rashi for the whole 24 hours? If that is true, then you can consider the Chandra Lagna, generate the chart irrespective of what time it is, ignore the ascendant that you see there, and considering natal moon as Lagna, that means using Chandra Lagna, then you start analyzing that birth chart. Because if you already know the event happened, then you can use the other techniques like the Bihurugu Chakra Paddhati or Bihurugu Sarla Paddhati. Depending upon the age of the native, you can use one of those two techniques. Remember, if you do not know that the time of birth, do not use the Vimsottari Dasa or Yogini Dasa or any other Dasa systems that we generally use it. That's the reason why this presentation I want to exclusively show people that under these conditions the only thing that I usually use is go to the BCP, Bihurugu Chakra Paddhati rules, and if for that age, if there are any Bihurugu Sarla Paddhati rules, then I just take it and analyze it. Now going back to the native's chart, Janet Reno, if you look at it, moon is in Aries, Mesha, so that is her Lagna right now. And now when you start from there, since the native died on 7th November, we have to look for the causes for her death. So you look at the second house and the seventh house, the Marakas, the eighth house, the default natural death, and then the 12th house for any other reasons for death. So first in the house, what you see here is the second and the seventh house lord is Venus. Venus is the second and seventh house lords. So Venus is the lord for both the Karra, both Marakas. For the both Baraka houses, Venus is the lord. Now that tells you that you have to emphasize on Venus, natal Venus position from Chandra Lagna. Now when you look at it, Venus is in Leo. That's the fifth house from moon. And Venus, if you look at Venus at the time of her death, transit Rahu is in Leo too. That means Rahu, who is the terminator, is now touched the Maraka house lord. So just by looking at it without even looking at the longevity of the native's age or anything, you can first keep in mind that there is a possibility for this native's death. Okay, so from a higher altitude, we found that the second and seventh house lord is joined with the Rahu, and hence during the Rahu, as long as Rahu touches natal Venus, there is always a possibility. Now the second question comes is eighth house. Mars is the lord of the eighth house. Mars is also the lord of the first house. Okay, so from what we do is, where is Mars? Mars is in the fourth house from Moon. So we go and look at, is Mars alone? No. Mars has joined with Sun, who is the lord of the fifth house, and Mars has joined with Mercury, who is the lord of the sixth house. Sixth house deals with Rogastanamu or illness. So the eighth house lord has joined with the sixth house lord. Keep that in mind. And now let's go and look at the aspects of this Mars. Where is Mars? Mars is aspecting the fourth. Mars first one is the fourth aspect. So from fourth house, the first aspect is on the seventh house. Gosh. So seventh, Mars by default, Mars is always looking at the seventh house. Who is the eighth house lord is always looking at the seventh house. So we have to be careful at that point. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then Mars direct aspect is on the 10th house, which is empty, that's fine. And Mars 8th aspect is on Jupiter, 11th house, where Jupiter is residing. And so from Moon, you have to look at which houses does Jupiter owns. First and the foremost, Jupiter owns the 12th house. We know 12th house is hospitalizations or mokshasthanamu, whichever way you want to look at it. So Mars, the 8th house lord, is looking at the 12th house lord directly. The 8th house lord is looking at the 12th house lord directly. This indicates that Mars is co-joined with 6th house lord Mercury, and Mars is looking at the 12th house lord Jupiter. This is the second point to keep in mind. Then comes the 8th house. We have talked about the 8th house lord is Mars. So let's go and look in the 8th house. Who is there in the 8th house? In 8th house is Scorpio. So from November 2014 all the way up to January 2016, transit Saturn will be in Scorpio. We all know that. And now transit Saturn is co-joined with natal Rahu in the 8th house for this during this period. Well, Saturn is the natural Maraka, Rahu is the terminator. The house where they both co-joined is the 8th house from Chandra Moon. That's second point, for another point, important point that we have to note. And the most important thing that I would like to emphasize right now is, from Moon, transit Saturn is in the 8th house. That means since November 2014, the native is going through Ashtamasini. I'm sure a lot of people knew when I said Ashtamasini. A lot of people who have a basic knowledge in astrology will understand what type of difficulties the native will go through during that Ashtamasini period. Now let's go and look at the most important thing, the another natural Maraka, Saturn. Saturn is in the 12th house from Moon. 12th house is Mokshasthanamu from a spiritual perspective. From a medical perspective, 12th house can be said as hospitalization, frequent visits to hospitals, or the native having a long-term medical care. One of those two, depending upon the situation, depending upon the native's age, the society where the native is residing, the economic status of the native. So the environmental parameters works is what we need to look at when we are figuring it out, what impact will the native have from this house. Now, in 12th house, the natural Maraka Saturn is residing. The and what you look at it, the Saturn's third aspect. We'll start. Saturn's third aspect is on the second house. Gosh, second house is Maraka, house of Maraka. So when you look at all these things, what you see is natal Saturn's third aspect is on second house. Transit Saturn and natal Rahu's direct aspect is on second house. Nobody can stop during this Ashtamaseni period. It's astrologically there is a high possibility, 99.99%. When I saw the native chart, I was sure that it's going to happen before transit Saturn leaves Scorpio, but I was not sure. I was still waiting to see. Since it is not something that I would like to put forth in the public forum, I kept quiet till the event has happened. I saw this when I read about her sickness earlier. Then I went through the chart and I knew this one is going to happen. Now, Saturn's third aspect is on second. Natal Saturn's third aspect is on second house. Transit Saturn and natal Rahu's direct aspect is on second house. Amazing, amazing part. And now let's look at natal Saturn's direct aspect. Natal Saturn's direct aspect is on the sixth house. Remember, sixth house is Rogasthanamo or illness. And when you look at the transit analysis, when you look at the transit planets, transit Jupiter, who is the lord of the 12th house from moon, is there. Is in Virgo between June 2016 and June 2017, close to June 2017. So when I looked at it, I was like, before the transit Saturn leaves Scorpio, and because natal Saturn is having a direct aspect on transit Jupiter, who is the 12th house lord, and these two, both natal and transit Saturn, having a aspect on the second house, somehow I felt that it should happen. And then comes the transit natal Saturn's 10th aspect. Natal Saturn's 10th aspect is on the 9th house, which is empty. That's very good sign for us. From moon, it is the 9th house, it is empty. So remember, transit Saturn is in Scorpio, and then it's very soon, on by somewhere in January 26th or 27th or last week of January 2017, transit Saturn will be going to Sagittarius. That means natal Saturn's 10th aspect is on Sagittarius. That's when transit Saturn is about to enter Sagittarius. So what you can notice is that the event, whatever the event, the Maraka event that is about to happen, will be completed before transit Saturn leaves Scorpio, or for sure as soon as it enters Sagittarius. So that's the reason why when I looked at this chart, I felt that the most important thing to notice here is the 8th house lord Mars, the 2nd and 7th house lord Venus, and the planets natural Maraka Saturn. These are the three important things that we have to look at from Chandra Lagna if you want to figure it out, what is the cause, astrological reason for the native's death. Let's now look at Janet Reno's birth chart and then correlate with the Bihuruga Chakra Paddhati. When you see here, at the time the native died on 7th November 2016. So when you look at the Bihuruga Chakra Paddhati, the cycle ruler is Saturn, and that is after the 78th birthday, which is on 6th July 2016, Saturn's, the cycle ruler, will activate the 8th house from its natal position. Okay, now 7th house from its natal position. So let's go and look at Saturn. Where is Saturn? Saturn is in the 12th house from Chandra Lagna, that is in Pisces, where the owner being Jupiter. So from 12th house in Chandra Lagna, the Saturn's direct aspect is the 7th aspect. is on, look at it, it's the sixth house from Chandra Lagna, where transit Jupiter is residing in November 2016. Transit Jupiter is there. So Saturn's direct aspect is on transit Jupiter. That's very important thing that we have to keep in mind. And from Moon, Jupiter is the lord of the 12th house. So Saturn is activating the 7th house. Second and 7th houses are considered as Marakas. So Saturn has activated the 7th house, residing in the 12th house from Moon has activated the 6th house from Moon, where transit Jupiter is residing. That's enough to say that when from Bhiruga Chakra Paddhati, how Saturn's activation of the 7th house has resulted in this unfortunate event in her death. Now, having since Saturn is the cycle ruler, let's go and see where is transit Saturn residing. If you look at it, transit Saturn is residing in the 8th house from Moon. Remember, whenever transit Saturn is residing in the 8th house from Moon, indicates that it is Ashtama Seni, and by default Ashtama Seni has considered to be will result in a number of difficulties and hurdles to the native. Any native who has Ashtama Shani will sure to have some sort of disturbances in his or her life during that period. For Janet Reno, the Ashtama Shani began in November 2014 and it lasts all the way for 2.5 years, that is June 2017. And in the 8th house from Moon, Rahu is residing. So when you look at it, Rahu is the terminator. Transit Saturn is the Marakadipati, and Saturn is activating the 7th house, the Maraka, the house of death or cause for death. So when you look at these three planets, and transit Jupiter is in the Virgo, thereby it is having a direct aspect with the transit with natal Saturn. That's very important here for you to see. And then comes the what else is there at the time of death. First and the foremost, what we look at is from Moon, who is the lord of the second house. Second and 7th houses are Marakas. So let's go and look at the lord of the second house. The second house lord is Venus. Second and 7th house lord is Venus. And from Moon, natal Venus is in the 5th house, Leo, but transit Rahu is residing in Leo for the past 1.5 year. That means transit Rahu is touching the second house lord Venus for the past 1.5 year. We don't know what's the medical issues that the lady had for the past 1.5 year, because transit Rahu is touching natal Venus, the second and 7th house lord. Transit Saturn is in the 8th house, Ashtamaseni, the Ashtamaseni began, and transit Saturn is touching natal Rahu. These are the two conditions. The third one is natal Saturn is having a direct aspect on Virgo, where transit Jupiter is residing. These three are very important combinations, and in my opinion, without knowing the ascendant, if you just look at the Chandra Lagna, the chart based on Chandra Lagna, and then use the Bhiruga Chakra Paddhati, this information is sufficient to say why the native could not survive. So now another thing I would like to do here is, since Venus is the lord of the 2nd and 7th house from Moon, let's go and look at transit Venus. Where is transit Venus? If you look at transit Venus, transit at the time of death, transit Venus is in Rashi Sandhi. That means partially it is in Scorpio and it was getting ready to go into Sagittarius during the first week of November. So transit Venus is in the 8th house at the last phase, at the edge of the 8th house, where transit Saturn is also there, and natal Rahu is also there. And from the 8th house, if you look at it, transit Saturn, transit Venus and Rahu, all the three are having a direct aspect on the second house, which is a Maraka, house of Maraka house. So one, as while transit Venus was moving slowly away from Scorpio to Sagittarius, it has activated whatever the residual relationship that it had with transit Saturn in the 8th house, and with natal Rahu in the 8th house, along with the other combinations that I explained earlier. All these combinations had resulted for the NATO to to come into that unfortunate event, to get that unfortunate event activated. So, unfortunately, it was either during that specific period when transit Venus was going away from Scorpio and entering Sagittarius during the Rashi Sandhi. That's the period when the NATO had died.